Okay, so I'm doing a slightly different take on this. Is rather than a bright shiny tool, it's I'm going to be talking about plain text and looking at ways that we can kind of improve some productivity. So Markdown is really not really a tool, but almost a toolkit. And what it is just a really simple way of writing markup. So what's markup? Well, markup is basically how you describe the things that are in a document. And not really how they look, but what they actually are. So when we write, most of us only use a handful of elements. So we use various headings to kind of create structure in a document. We use paragraphs, we have ordered lists, we've got unordered lists, we put links in there, we have diagrams and images that we insert, quotes, and then we might bold and emphasize parts of our text, but that's pretty much it. And if you look at a kind of document, you can create a really complicated document just with those basic elements. So when you break it down like that, you realize that most of the other parts of a word processing application are just about formatting, making things look something on a page. So Markdown really is a way to strip away all that stuff back to just what is the content, what is the text that you're writing, and then boiling down that kind of markup syntax to just something that's really simple. So HTML is a really good example of a marked up language. What it does is within those little brackets is define what are those little bits on a page. So Markdown basically takes that same approach. So when we want to define things, we don't have to kind of come up with all these little tags and brackets and close tags to stop it from unformatting. What we do is just do it really simply. So if you want to create a heading levels, you just put in a hash at the start. So if you want a heading level 1, you put 1 hash. You want a heading level 2, you put 2 hashes, all the way through down to kind of heading level 6. If you want to have lists, then you just put a dash and then you can have a list. If you want an ordered list with numbers, you just put a number and then a period and then start typing. And it doesn't actually matter if you don't follow the order. When you actually goes to render, you can actually kind of see that it'll kind of show you and re-render out the actual ordered list that's there. You want to stick an image in, the syntax again is really simple. You put an exclamation mark, you put in a little square brackets. This is the title for accessibility. This is what I want to call it. And then you put a link to where that image is. The same with a link. You put in the text that you want to become the link, and then in the parentheses put where the actual link is. And if you want to do a quote, you just use a greater than symbol. And that's really kind of as basic as it gets. And because you're just using basic textual elements, it's just plain text. And so that means that you can use pretty much any kind of application that can write text for this. You can also kind of extend this. You can create tables. You can create inline references as well. And there's a whole variety of different ways that you can kind of add on to Markdown and some of the possibilities. But the big thing about this is that you're not really kind of sucked into just using one application to do all your editing. You can basically move between formats. You could even write Markdown in Word. You could open it up in Evernote. Any kind of application you can kind of think of, you can write it, because it's really just comes back to being plain text. So there are a bunch of actual dedicated Markdown apps. So they're pretty much available for every platform. If you do a quick search, there's a couple of articles. I think it's like slant.com or something like that does, here's a list of all the ones that are on Mac, here's the ones that are all on Windows, here's iOS. But these are some of the ones that I kind of use on a regular basis. Byword works really well on Mac and iPad. And then there's a whole bunch of other ones. So what would you actually kind of use this Markdown for? Well, the biggest one is that you can create clean HTML that you can literally copy and paste out of that and paste somewhere else. So if you're moving content and you don't really care about the formatting component of it, you can put cleanly marked up languages between applications. If you're copying stuff into i2, you can stick it in there. You can blog with it. So WordPress has an option where you can go in and set Markdown to be your default way of writing your blog. There's other platforms that are built solely around using Markdown as the format. You can create websites. So I built all the content from the Learning Exchange that we've built is all written in Markdown as Markdown, and then there's an application that converts all that on into a website. So that's kind of that little screenshot onto the right there. You can also create presentations. So this actual presentation was all written in Markdown, so just plain text. There's an app called Dexit, which on the Mac, which allows you to convert that, but there's a variety of web tools as well that do the same kind of thing. And you can even use Markdown to create fancy kind of diagrams. So like Philip was showing with the mind mapping, you can actually do that just in Markdown. That just needs a little bit of JavaScript at the other end to kind of help render that out, but the text itself is all written in Markdown. So the real benefit of this is that it's really easy to kind of get complex things out of really simple documentation. Because it's just a plain text file, you can stick it up in the cloud. It's really small file size. You can sync it. You can open it up in different apps and sync it all back to that one file. It doesn't tie you in. And the reality is that text files are actually future-proof. That text files from 20 years ago can still be opened today. Try and open a Word document or whatever Word was 20 years ago, you'd probably struggle to do that. So you're not locked into a proprietary format. So if you're thinking about writing and doing stuff, it's a really kind of future-proofed bit of technology. So that's plain text and what you can do with it.